In this class, we're going to look at using a different tracking method than we did last time. So let's go ahead and start by creating a read node by pressing R and reading in the footage for the class. So let's go navigate to where the class 3 files are, image, ingest, and let's get this movie here and read this movie in. And let's read in the elements that were provided for us as well. So we'll select this graffiti and press next, and select the second one and press open. Now, in the opening class, I discussed closing the properties bin and using floating windows. I'm going to go ahead and move my node graph up here as well and leave my dope sheet and my curve editor down here. And let's see, we need a viewer to view this. So let's go ahead and press tab, and if we type in viewer, we can create a viewer just by pressing tab. And let's look at our footage. So we can see it's a handheld. The purpose of it is to create a POV type shot where the person in question, whose point of view it is, sees graffiti on this garage. So we could potentially use a 2D tracker, and we'll try that. But for right now, let's go ahead and look at using the PlanarTracker node. But first, let's create a shuffle node and shuffle the alpha channel in. Now, it's showing me that this already has an alpha channel associated with it, but these don't. Oops. So let's copy this and paste it on there. So now all of our footage has a clean alpha channel. Let's move these over here. Let me make some room for my node graph. Oops. Okay. Oops. Moving everything everywhere. Okay, so now the PlanarTracker node is located in the transform menu. Go ahead and navigate down, grab the PlanarTracker, and as you can see, it comes up looking more like a roto node than the tracker we used last time. And that's in fact because it is a roto node. You could create a PlanarTracker in a roto node by creating a layer and turning it into a PlanarTrack layer. So the way this works is, let's go back to frame 1, and by default the Bezier tool is selected. I'm going to go ahead and select the cusp Bezier. Oops. Let me delete that cusp Bezier. Let's look through it here. We'll go ahead and create the Bezier. Let's draw out some points here. And just select them along there. Now you'll just want to use the top transport controls. The middle one, of course, is stop tracking. This is track to the next frame, track to the end, and track a range of frames. Let's go ahead and track to the end. And it's going to bring up a progress window on my main screen that says it's going to take about 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and I'm going to pause the recording, and I'll come back as soon as it's done tracking and we can go on from there. Okay, now that the PlanarTracker has completed, let's go ahead and see what it's done for us. It's tracked all the way to the end, to frame 203. So let's go ahead and center the viewer and turn that off. Now let's look at the plane. Again, if you hold your mouse over any button, it's going to show you like a little tip. Let's see here. Show me the tip. Tool tip, please. maybe the viewer's not selected. Anyway, this will show you the plane, and it's a UI issue. It should be in blue, and this will allow you to edit it. Now if you edit it on this frame, it's going to kind of move a few keyframes, but not all of them. If we go back to the home frame, the reference frame, and we put a grid up, and we can now we can move the whole thing. So let's go ahead and let's move this whole thing like this. Now let's move this one to the corner. And let's go ahead and move this one maybe up a little, maybe like that. Let's move this one a little bit more. Let's go ahead actually and put this one on the corner here, and this one on the corner here. Now let's put these on these corners as well. Let's see if we can get our grid to match the perspective of this garage, like so. Let's adjust the gamma of the viewer. Maybe what we need to do is put it right there, maybe. I mean, it's not going to be that big of a deal in this situation, but if you were doing a TV screen or a cell phone screen, you'd want to line these up with the corners. So let's go ahead and reset the viewer, and let's kill the grid. Let's kill this, and let's kill this. Now, if you wanted to change the reference frame, you could go ahead and use this button here, in the middle here, to set this as the reference frame. And you can use this to go to reference frame. And then you can use this button to reset the reference frame. And I forget what this one does. I'm afraid to push it without it giving me a tooltip. So, now that that's done, let's go ahead and see what we can do. Let's create a corner pin relative, and let's also create a corner pin absolute. Baked simply means that the data, let's close this real quick. So baked simply means that the data that it's going to create is in the node. The keyframes are set in here. Again, you can see them in the curve editor here. If we look at the From tab, it's set to the default format size. So let's go ahead and go to the Draw menu and create a checkerboard. And it creates it at the root format of 2048 by 1556. So let's go press S over the node graph and change our full size format to be Ultra HD. And the checkerboard is now the root format of Ultra HD. If we connect this to the corner pin absolute and look through it, we can see that it's now taken the from points of the corners and mapped them to the 2 points of the corner pin, which are animated, right? So if we grab a merge node, again, M for merge, let's just close that, and let's put, oopsie, moving everything all over the place here. Let's go ahead and connect that to the B side of the garage. And now you can see our checkerboard is right over the garage and moving right along with it. Now, that's what an absolute does. It takes an image that's the same form. It takes the format of the image, in this case the full size format, and remaps it down to the corners where the corner pin is set to in this node. So that works great for screen inserts. Now in this case, let's go ahead and look at the relative. What's the relative doing? 846, 758. What does this mean? Where is it getting these numbers? Let's go back to the reference frame, and you can see it's 846 and 758. So the relative is going to use the from points. The from points are the same as the 2 points on the reference frame, after which the 2 points are animated. So now, let's connect it to this checkerboard and look through it to see what it's doing. Seemingly nothing, right? Seemingly it's just the checkerboard. But now, if we move through, we can see that our checkerboard is now being animated. So our checkerboard is being match moved, changing translation, rotation, and perspective or skew with this corner pin, but it's not changing the image size. So if we look at that, if we connect the A input of the merge to the over and look through the over, we can see that now this checkerboard is over the footage and sticking to it pretty nice. Maybe if we had a transform upstream, let's go to the reference frame, scale it down, move it over, maybe put it right in the corner there. Now, again, it's animating right over. But, you know, we can do whatever we want with it. Okay, so that's the difference between an absolute and a relative. So in this case, let's go ahead and grab this absolute and let's connect it to this piece of graffiti. Okay? Now let's look through it. Well, this is interesting. Let's go ahead and connect the A input here. Let's go back to the reference frame and put A over B. And let's go ahead and look through that and see what we're getting. So we're getting this thing down in the corner. Let's look at our graffiti. The format is 1600 by 1200. And again, this was set to our full-size format, our Ultra HD. If we just click Set to Input, it's going to change the format to the format of the graffiti. Now, we could use a keyer to get rid of this white, but if you remember that multiplying an image will, one will be the color of the pixel below it, black will be 0, etc. So let's go ahead and just go change the merge operation to multiply and see what we get. This is interesting, but not quite what we're looking for. We want to merge this only. We don't want to multiply the outside of this plate by black. So let's go ahead and grab a copy node. And let's create a new channel. And let's call it garage.mat. And I'm going to put an R just to remind myself that .mat is in the red channel. And hit OK and create a new layer, garage yes. And let's copy that new layer into here. Now, if we go into the merge node and we tell it to use garage.matr as a mask, now it's only going to multiply the graffiti by that area. And we have a weird thing happening here. And I believe this is being caused by anti-aliasing, where there's semi-transparent pixels here. So what we can do is we can create a filter node called an erode fast, which classically comes up as dilate. Let's put this in here and select it to dilate the alpha channel. And let's just dilate that by -2 pixels, and that should get rid of that little edge. So this looks pretty good, but we kind of want the end of it to be under the tree. So let's move this down, and let's grab a transform node and put the transform node upstream of the corner pin node. And if we hold down Command, we can move its center point to be over this, and let's just go ahead and move it over there. And as you can see, as we move it, it's moving in perspective. So let's put that graffiti there. That looks pretty good. Now as we scrub through, we can see as it moves, it's being revealed as the tree moves, and the edge of the garage is revealed. But here it should be being occluded by the tree. It should be behind the tree, but in fact it's over the tree. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to create a mask to tell it not to composite the graffiti in that area. So there's a couple ways we could do that. We could just cut the tree out, and then in another layer we could just put the tree back over. So if I were to draw a quick Bezier around this tree like this, pre-malt RGBA, and now let's just connect it to this, because if we look at this, even though it's this garage channel, it's still no graffiti. Let's do this, and now let's grab another merge node, and again put A over B. So that's one way we could do it. Another way we could do it is we could use it to stencil out this alpha channel that's already being used in a mask in this layer. So since that seems like a little bit cleaner way of working, let's do that. Hold down Command and draw out a dot node to tidy that up. Let's keep that there. Now let's delete this Bezier and do a nicer Bezier in this on frame 1. Let's look at it unimpeded by this. Select the Bezier tool. And let's hit spacebar to go full screen. Now let's go ahead and draw some points that nicely conform to the edge of this tree. So I'm going to zoom in. Again, these should stay red, these Beziers. This is definitely a bug in Nuke 11. It may not be doing this on Windows. I haven't used Nuke on a Windows computer in a long time, and certainly not Nuke 11. So I'd like to have a cusp on this one, so I'm going to hit Z, which will just increase the cusp. Alternatively, you could right click and hit smooth, which will add the Bezier handles to it. So let's go up there like that. Let's bring this one down, down. See, I can see that this one is twisted around that way. So let's do this. This one's a bit twisted too. That should be pretty good. Actually right here, let's add a point right there. So let's click on this button here, the little pen tool, and let's just click there, and that adds a point. Let's go back to the arrow for selecting and moving everything, and let's do this. Now this top part looks pretty good, but this bottom part's not. So if we hold Command and click this, now we can then break that tangent and make that tangent go the direction we want. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, we could go through this and animate this by hand by selecting it and moving into position. But let's try something a little quicker. let's go ahead and use the tracker node that we used in the last class by hitting tab and typing in tracker. Use the arrow key, navigate down and hit enter to select it, and let's go ahead and connect it up here and press 1 to look through it. Now, let's close my roto just for a moment and set this down here. Oopsie, there we go. Now, let's go ahead and create a tracking point right here. Now let's make it search for this pattern. Now let's go ahead and track it to the end. What we're going to do is we're going to track 2 points on the tree, and then we're going to use the data to create a match move baked, and then we're going to use that match move baked data in the roto node so that our roto is stuck to the tree. And this may seem like a bit of a process to acquire all this tracking data and link it up, but trust me, this is much faster and going to be much more accurate than animating the roto by hand. So anytime we can automate a process and let the computer do the thinking for us, or rather, do the math for us, then that's going to be good. So let's go ahead and hit Command Option and create one more tracking point down here. I'm just gonna, okay, so let's go ahead and now track it back to the beginning. And as you can see, Nuke's tracker is pretty fast. If we look in this little window here to watch our progress, we can see that it's sticking to the pattern extremely well. And we can look in our curve editor as it draws the curve, and we can see that the curves, the X and Y curves for the 2 tracks are matching extremely well. So it's almost done. Let's go ahead and tell the tracker that we want these to both calculate translation and rotation. And let's go into the transform, and the reference frame is already set to 1 by default. So now we want to create a transform match move baked. So let's just create that and close the tracker. Now back to our roto node. We're going to use these up here. So let's go back to our roto node and let's create a new layer, and then drag this Bezier and drop it into that layer. There we go. Now in the transform tab of that layer, open the transform tab, and let's open this match move. And as we can see on this match move, translate is at 0 and rotate is at 0, as one would expect on the reference frame. So let's hold down Command and drag this translation data over the little curve of this translation, and you can see there's a little plus. And once we do that, it creates a green expression linked arrow. Essentially what it's saying is that this box is now taking its data from this box. And if we click on this again and edit expression, we can see that this X value is parented to transform underscore match move 1 dot translate X and dot translate for the Y. So you could easily write that expression yourself, but it's very handy to hold down Command and drag that value over the rotate. And let's also do it for the center, which now moves the center there. So let's go ahead and close this dialog, or this properties window. And now that we've done that, let's go ahead and move through our footage, and we can see our roto is sticking right to our tree no matter what frame we're on. So that is excellent. That's exactly what we want. Let's go ahead and look through that roto real quick and press A for alpha, and we can see here's our alpha channel. Now, what we want to do is we still want to use this garage map, but let's cut the tree out. A for alpha goes back to the color. Now, if we cut the tree out, remember that this garage mat is multiplying this image over the garage in this area. We want to cut the tree out of that. So let's create a merge node. And instead of putting this alpha over this alpha, we're going to tell it to use the alpha from A to stencil or cut out the alpha from B. So there we go. Now if we look through that and we hit A for alpha, it's out of the screen because of the format difference. But if we go here and let's create a shuffle node, let's attach this shuffle node here, and in the input let's take the garage and let's just shuffle it into the alpha channel. So it's taking garage.mat and shuffling it into the alpha channel. Now if we look through that and we hit alpha, now we can see where the tree is cutting out the garage. Okay, so that's good. Let's go ahead and delete that shuffle. We're done with that. I just wanted to use that to illustrate what's happening here. Now this has a nice blurry edge, and right now our roto is not very blurry. So let's select this Bezier and let's give it a little bit of feather, maybe a little negative feather, like that. Do that. Let's feather by 8 pixels. There we go. Now, let's create a scope. Let's create a vector scope. And let's look upstream real quick. And you can see that the saturation is very low on this clip. And if we look down here, now our saturation of this is very high. So let's go ahead and create a color correct node by pressing C. And let's put this color correct node in here. And let's decrease its overall saturation to bring it into the level of the clip. Like so. Maybe it should be a little bit more saturated, but not too much. And while we're at it, let's create a grade node by pressing G. Let's look through the grade node. Now let's go ahead and take the black point command. So we're looking through the grade node, so we have to press Command Option Shift to select from above. So let's select the black point, and now let's look over here and let's select a reasonable black point on this too. Perhaps this down here. So let's go ahead and map the lift to this. So Command Shift. Now let's look again at our result, and let's disable our grade node. Doesn't seem to be doing a whole lot. Yeah, it's lifting it a little bit, but it seems a little bit too crisp. So let's add a blur node onto it. And let's go ahead and just blur it by maybe 4 pixels. Let's blur it by just like that, like 3 pixel blur, just to take the edge off of it. And as we scrub through, you can see this frame is pretty motion blurred. So if we look here, see that's pretty motion blurred compared to the previous frames, and this is not. So what we need to do is go into our corner pin and set the motion blur to 1, and that adds the appropriate motion blur to the graffiti. So there we go. And when we get to the end, it's fully revealed from behind the tree. So, what we might want to do next is roto out a bit of this by creating a roto node, O for roto. Let's just go ahead and cut out one of these Primo RGBA. And we can do the same process as above. Let's create a transform and a merge. And again, we want to multiply that. Let's copy that into a new channel. Let's call it garage.matb. So garage.matg. Actually. No. Okay, so we can do the same process that we did before to add another piece of graffiti. Again, this one, the white is not quite white, so we'll want to put a grade in there to correct that. Let's go ahead and put this one here. And we can copy and paste and use this same absolute tracking solution. Let's go back to the reference frame and let's move it down where we had it. Okay. So we can use this same tracking solution again to pin this one to the garage. So go ahead. You can find other graffiti images easily on the internet. You can cut out the top, two of these to add some different graffiti onto this, and then on the bottom you can add a color correction node and color correct everything upstream by just bringing up the overall saturation and creating a little bit of contrast in the image, like so. Oops. So now we've had a quick look at using the PlanarTracker node and using the tracker node to match move a mat. We used the merge node as a stencil instead of an over, as well as a multiply, and we copied an alpha channel into a new channel to use for a mask inside of the merge node.